Hi everybody, Carl here with App. This is something that we've been really excited about since they announced their OLED late in 2016, and now that Sony has finally rejoined the game, we can do a side-by-side video for you between their A1 OLED and LG's new G7P. So let's get right into it. And keep in mind, most of what we're dealing with here is subjective, so if you have any thoughts to share, make sure to let us know in the comments section. Starting off, we'll take a look at the designs. They both have really slim bezels, so there isn't anything distracting you from the picture on the screens. The LG has a little glass edge that runs around the perimeter, and the Sony is just the metal frame. Both look good in their own way and are extremely minimal in their screen design. Now, the actual depth of the screen is another thing. The LG uses a picture-on-glass design that puts the OLED module right on the glass, which makes it incredibly thin. Sony's a bit thicker, but when you put it up against anything really other than the LG, it's still going to be considered super thin. They also have unique speaker systems that are incorporated into the designs. The LG uses its pedestal as a 4.2 channel Atmos-equipped soundbar, while the Sony uses their kickstand-style pedestal to house a 4-inch subwoofer, and it uses the actual glass screen on the TV along with 2 actuators on the back of the set to produce its sound. I will say that I found the Sony's sound to be a little fuller than the LG's, and both are better than just about any other stock TV speakers. However, I still think that either of these two sets deserve to be part of a more robust surround sound system. They can both be wall mounted as well. The Sony by folding in the kickstand on the back, and the LG by rotating the soundbar / pedestal at the bottom. When you do this, you get a total depth on the Sony of 3.5 inches, and on the LG, you're looking at 2.7 inches. And they're both VESA compliant, so you don't need any sort of proprietary wall mount to make those work. Now, touching back on the speakers' pedestals for a moment, that's also where you're going to find all the inputs, and they're almost identical on these. Both TVs are going to have 4 HDMI inputs that are all HDCP 2.2 compliant, and both have one with an audio return channel. They both have 3 USB inputs, a spot to hardwire an Ethernet cable, and an RS-232 hookup, and you also get an optical audio output. They even both have analog inputs for an old VCR or a DVD player that may not have an HDMI connection. So you get plenty of spots for hooking up components on both of them. And I guess the other thing to mention too, as far as the design goes, is how easy or not easy they are to move around. Now, I realize that this isn't something you're going to do every day, but having had to move both of these TVs several times to get different shots for this video, I will say definitively that the LG is way easier to move from one spot to another. The Sony is just kind of awkward to pick up. They're both really sturdy, but every time I moved the Sony, I always heard that little voice in the back of my head saying, "Please don't break." And I suppose if it did, I could get by with one kidney, but it's not ideal. Now, moving on, let's talk about the pictures on both of these sets, because that's kind of why we're all watching this, right? Now, I know different aspects of the picture can be measured scientifically. However, nobody has the same eyes, so again, what I'm telling you here is my opinion, and different people are going to say different things. So if you don't agree with me, again, let's talk about it in the comments section. Now, I think most typical users are going to be happy with the image quality on both of these sets right out of the box. I thought the colors on the LG looked a little more natural, where the Sony was a little oversaturated, so for the purposes of this video, we calibrated them to be close to one another, but for the video files out there, you can still fine-tune both sets to really dial it into your preferences. Black levels were obviously remarkable, being that these are both OLED sets, and although they don't list brightness levels on them, I found both to do really well in brightly lit rooms like we're in now, and they were exceptional in the dark as well. It was easy to see the LG adjusting to the brightness of the room, which was a little distracting at times, but nothing that would cause me to say, don't buy this TV. The other thing I noticed on both was there was some vertical banding. At first glance, I didn't see it at all, but then I looked at an all gray picture on the screens, and once I did that, I started noticing it, and then I could kind of tell while I was watching videos as well. It's one of those things that if you really focus on it, you can see it, but for the majority of everyday TV watchers, you're not going to notice it. Now, upscaling was good on both of them. I don't know that I can say really one was better than the other, because they both, I felt, did a really nice job with 720p, 1080p, and also 4K HDR content. As you can imagine, looks unbelievable on both. And they handled motion very well too. No noticeable trails on the screen for any fast-moving objects, and no blur that was easily detectable either. Viewing angle is another thing to touch on. These both held up really well. I'm not sure I can say one was better than the other. If there was a difference, it was so small that I didn't notice. I was still happy with the picture, even sitting well off to the sides of both. Now, one last thing to talk about for the picture category, and this may carry more weight with some than with others, is the fact that the G7P right out of the box has Dolby Vision and HLG HDR compatibility, while the Sony has HDR, but the HLG HDR and Dolby Vision aren't available as of the filming of this video. Now, the A1E is scheduled to get a firmware update later this year to accommodate both of those features, so I don't feel like it's a total strike against the Sony since it's coming, but it's something that the LG has currently and Sony doesn't. Plus, there's not much content available at the moment to take advantage of those features anyways. And the last thing to mention on these sets would be the smart features, and I'll include my thoughts on the remotes in this category as well. I have an Android phone, and with the Sony having that Android operating system, they worked pretty seamlessly together. I didn't notice much lag at all going from app to app, and moving between menus was smooth too. That being said, the LG has WebOS 3.5, which I like a lot, and it is super fast. I didn't notice any lag opening apps or switching from one to another, and going from menu to menu was great. To me, it seemed faster than the Sony, but that's kind of more of an eyeball test than anything scientific. The voice recognition from my attempts was much better on the Sony, but the LG was adequate. I just found that the Sony kind of understood the meaning of what I was asking for, where the LG was very literal in its translation of what I was saying. The LG does have an advantage in its ability to use the buttons on the remote as shortcuts to apps though. The Sony gives you a couple shortcut buttons for things like Netflix and Google, but the LG Magic Remote is more customizable with the new features of its operating system. Also, I don't really care for the pointer on the screen of the LG. It's nice to be able to type things in faster, but there were times where I felt like it didn't match up with where I was pointing, so that was a little distracting and a little bit irritating. That being said, if you find that you don't like that feature, you can always use the directional button instead. Overall, both of these TVs have their positives and both have some negatives, but I would be happy, honestly, watching either one. So what do you guys think? Have you seen them both in person? Which one would you pick? Make sure you let us know in the comments section. As always, thank you for watching, and remember to like and subscribe to see all the cool stuff here we have at Apt.